The obsidian sundial glinted in the harsh auction house lights, its polished black surface catching every flicker as the twins carefully placed it on display. Zephyr's hands trembled slightly, but Zaria's remained steady, her face a mask of determination. The siblings shared more than their unusual silver-violet eyes and the crescent-shaped birthmarks beneath their collarbones. They shared the weight of their mother's fading life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Starting bid for the Blackwood obsidian sundial at 50,000, announced the auctioneer, his voice echoing through the hushed Meridian auction house. From the back of the room, Thaddeus Everett watched, his knuckles white against the auction paddle he hadn't yet raised. The sundial meant nothing to him, but the twins, with their distinctive features and synchronized movements, had frozen him in place. For 16 years he'd searched, following false leads and empty promises. Now in this unexpected moment, the hollowness that had consumed him since that terrible night began to fill with something dangerous. Hope. The birthmarks. The same crescent shape his own children had been born with. The same silver-violet eyes. "Do I hear 60,000? The auctioneer called, scanning the crowd. Thaddeus raised his paddle, and the twins' eyes snapped toward him, widening in unison. The game had begun. Thunder cracked over the spires of Novaluna as Thaddeus Everett's autonomous vehicle glided between the gleaming towers. Rain streaked across the panoramic glass roof, distorting the city lights into watercolor smudges of blue and gold. His driver, an AI named Ariel, maintained a respectful silence as Thaddeus reviewed the information on his tablet for the 7th time. The Blackwood twins, Zephyr and Zaria, 16 years old. Residents of Halcyon Estates, once a prestigious neighborhood before the economic collapse of '39, now a shadow of its former glory. Mother, Octavia Blackwood, 42, diagnosed with Hollander's syndrome, a rare genetic disorder affecting the cellular regeneration of vital organs. Treatment cost approximately 2 million credits. Their father, Ambrose Blackwood, died in a maglev accident 3 years ago. Insurance disputes had left them with nothing. Nothing except the obsidian sundial, a family heirloom dating back generations, reportedly crafted from volcanic glass from the now submerged Elysian Islands. Thaddeus swiped away the public records and opened a secure folder containing much older information. His own twins, Ilara and Elian, would have been 16 now. The night they disappeared, along with his wife, Serafina, remained a wound that never healed. The investigation had spanned continents, cost millions, and yielded nothing but whispers and speculation. Until tonight. "Sir," Ariel's voice emanated from the vehicle's speakers, "we've arrived at Everett Nexus." The vehicle stopped beneath the angular overhang of the tallest building in Novaluna, a twisted spire of carbon fiber and programmable glass that housed the headquarters of Everett Quantum Technologies. Thaddeus closed his tablet and stepped out into the climate-controlled garage. "Should I remain on standby, sir?" Ariel asked. "No," Thaddeus replied, his voice rough from disuse. "I'll be taking the private shuttle to the residence." As the car pulled away, Thaddeus pressed his palm to the biometric scanner beside a nondescript door. It hissed open to reveal a private elevator. Inside, he spoke a command that wasn't on any building directory. "Constellation." The elevator ascended silently, bypassing the 100 floors of corporate territory to reach the penthouse suite that served as both sanctuary and prison for the past 16 years. The doors opened directly into a space of minimalist luxury, all clean lines and muted tones. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Novaluna sprawled below, like a circuit board studded with light. "You're later than expected," came a voice from the shadows. Dr. Callista Fenn emerged from the adjacent room, her silver hair pulled into a severe knot at the nape of her neck. For 20 years, she had served as Thaddeus's personal physician, confidant, and perhaps the closest thing to a friend the reclusive billionaire had permitted himself since the tragedy. "I attended an auction," Thaddeus said, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey from a crystal decanter. "An auction?" Callista raised an eyebrow. "You haven't left Everett Nexus for anything less than a board meeting in 3 years." Thaddeus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he crossed to his desk and activated the holographic display. With a gesture, he brought up the images captured discreetly during the auction, close-ups of the twins, their profiles, and most importantly, a zoomed image of Zaria's exposed collarbone as she reached up to adjust the sundial, the crescent birthmark. "Is this some kind of cruel joke?" Callista whispered, stepping closer to the image. "I had the exact same thought," Thaddeus replied, his voice tight. "But I've run preliminary biometric analyses. Facial structure, eye, spacing, cranial proportions. They match the projected models of how Ilara and Elian would look at 16. He swallowed hard. "The birthmarks are identical." "That's impossible," Callista said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Serafina and the children died in the yacht explosion. We both accepted that years ago." "Did we?" Thaddeus turned to face her. "There were never any remains recovered, just debris and Serafina's blood-stained scarf." Callista's face hardened. "So what now? You think these random teenagers from Halcyon Estates are somehow your long-lost children? That's absurd, Thaddeus. You're torturing yourself with false hope." "Their mother is dying," Thaddeus said, ignoring her warning. "Hollander's syndrome. They're selling family heirlooms to fund her treatment. And I've just purchased their sundial for 250,000 credits." He drained his whiskey. 3 times the asking price. Callista's eyes widened. "You can't just..." "I've also arranged for a meeting tomorrow to return the sundial personally." "This is madness," Callista whispered. But Thaddeus was already walking away toward the room he'd preserved exactly as it had been 16 years ago, a nursery for twins who never came home. "I need to know, Callista," he said without turning, "even if it breaks me all over again." The Blackwood residence stood out in Halcyon Estates like a withered rose in a forgotten garden. Once elegant with its Victorian architecture and hand-carved trim, the 3-story house now showed signs of prolonged financial struggle. Peeling paint, a partially collapsed greenhouse, solar panels missing from sections of the roof. Thaddeus stood at the gate, the obsidian sundial carefully packed in an unassuming canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He'd deliberately dressed down. Dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and a weather-resistant jacket without designer logos. The last thing he wanted was to arrive announcing his wealth and status. He pressed the antiquated doorbell and heard it echo inside the house. Footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Zaria Blackwood, her silver-violet eyes widening in recognition. "You're the man from the auction," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that sent a shock of familiarity through Thaddeus's spine. "The one who bought our sundial." Thaddeus nodded, suddenly finding his carefully prepared speech inadequate. My name is Thaddeus Everett. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I was hoping to speak with you and your brother, and perhaps your mother if she's feeling well enough." Zaria studied him with an intensity that belied her 16 years. "Why did you pay so much? The sundial isn't worth 250,000. I'd prefer to explain that to all of you if possible." She hesitated, then stepped back. "Zephyr's upstairs with Mom. She's having a good day, so your timing is fortunate." Thaddeus followed her into a foyer where faded elegance clung to every surface. Antique furnishings too valuable to sell, mixed with utilitarian replacements for pieces that had likely been auctioned off years ago. Family photographs lined the walls, the twins at various ages, always together, always with that unnerving symmetry of movement and expression. "Wait here," Zaria said, gesturing to a sitting room before disappearing up a grand staircase. Alone, Thaddeus found himself drawn to the photographs. There were fewer of Octavia Blackwood than one might expect in a family home, and most were taken from a distance or at angles that obscured her features. Strange. One photo in particular caught his attention. The twins at about age 5, building a sandcastle on an unfamiliar beach. Behind them, partially out of frame, stood a woman whose face was turned away, but whose hand rested on Zephyr's shoulder. The sleeve of her blouse had slid up just enough to reveal what appeared to be a small tattoo on her wrist. A stylized constellation. Thaddeus felt the floor tilt beneath him. Serafina had that exact tattoo. The Cassiopeia constellation, inked to commemorate the birth of the twins, whose names Ilara and Elian had been inspired by celestial bodies. "Mr. Everett?" He turned to find Zephyr Blackwood standing in the doorway, his posture guarded but curious. Unlike his sister's flowing movements, Zephyr carried himself with a controlled precision that reminded Thaddeus painfully of himself at that age. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Thaddeus said, regaining his composure. "We're curious why anyone would pay so much for a family paperweight," Zephyr replied with a hint of suspicion. "Especially someone who could buy the entire auction house if he wanted to." So they had recognized him, or at least researched him after the auction. "I believe introductions are in order first," came a new voice, frail but dignified. Octavia Blackwood entered the room slowly, one hand on Zaria's arm for support, the other gripping an elegant cane. She was thin to the point of fragility, her skin bearing the telltale translucence of Hollander's syndrome, but her eyes, a deep amber unlike the twins, burned with intelligence and caution. "Octavia Blackwood," she said, extending her free hand, "I understand you've developed a sudden interest in obscure astronomical instruments, Mr. Everett." Her tone carried a subtle challenge that didn't escape Thaddeus. He accepted her hand, noting how cold her fingers felt against his. "The sundial is remarkable," he said, carefully extracting it from his bag and placing it on the coffee table. "But I must admit, it wasn't the primary reason for my interest." The three Blackwoods exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that stirred another painful memory for Thaddeus. His own twins had done the same, communicated volumes without words. "Please sit," Octavia gestured to the armchair opposite the sofa where she settled between the twins, "and explain why one of Novaluna's most reclusive billionaires has appeared on our doorstep." Thaddeus sat, acutely aware that whatever he said next would irrevocably change all their lives. He had rehearsed this moment for hours, calculating every variable, yet now found himself adrift. 16 years ago, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "My wife and 2 children disappeared from our yacht during a storm off the coast of the Elysian Islands. The official investigation concluded that they perished when the vessel's fuel cells exploded, though no bodies were ever recovered." The twins had gone completely still, but Octavia's expression remained neutral, almost practiced. "A tragic story," she said, "but I failed to see—" "My children were twins," Thaddeus continued, "a boy and a girl. They were born with distinctive crescent-shaped birthmarks below their collarbones." Zaria's hand unconsciously moved to touch the spot beneath her shirt where her own birthmark lay hidden. Zephyr's jaw tightened. "Surely you aren't suggesting—" Octavia began, but Thaddeus pressed on. "I've spent 16 years searching, following every lead, investigating every possibility. Until yesterday, I'd begun to accept that they were truly gone." He leaned forward. "And then I saw your children at the auction house. The same birthmarks, the same silver-violet eyes, the same synchronized movements." "This is preposterous," Octavia said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Zephyr and Zaria are my children. I have birth certificates, medical records. Easily falsified, Thaddeus countered gently, especially 16 years ago, during the identity crisis after the digital collapse. You think we're your missing kids? Zephyr spoke finally, his voice carefully controlled. Based on coincidental birthmarks and eye color? I think it's a possibility that deserves investigation, Thaddeus replied. One that could benefit all of us. How exactly? Zaria asked, her natural curiosity overtaking caution. Thaddeus turned his attention to Octavia. You're suffering from Hollander's syndrome. Advanced stage, based on your symptoms. You need the Lazarin treatment, a complete cellular reprogramming that costs approximately 3 million credits and is only available at 3 facilities globally. Octavia paled. How could you possibly know? I own Everett Quantum Technologies, Thaddeus said simply. We developed the quantum computing that makes the Lazarin treatment possible, and I'm prepared to ensure you receive it immediately, regardless of whether my suspicions about the twins prove correct. The room fell silent as the implications of his offer settled over them. Hope and suspicion battled in the twins' expressions, while Octavia's face had gone completely blank. What would you want in return? She asked finally. DNA testing, Thaddeus answered. Non-invasive, conducted by an independent laboratory of your choosing. If the results show no relation, I'll still cover the treatment costs as compensation for the intrusion, if they confirm my suspicions. He trailed off, unwilling to voice the possibilities that had kept him awake through the night. And if we refuse, Zephyr challenged. Thaddeus met his gaze directly. Then I walk away. The sundial is yours, regardless. I won't force this on any of you. Another silent exchange passed between the twins before Zaria spoke up. We need to discuss this privately. Of course, Thaddeus stood. Take whatever time you need. Here's my private contact. He placed a simple white card on the table. Available day or night. As he turned to leave, Octavia's voice stopped him. Mr. Everett. He looked back to find her studying him with an unreadable expression. Did you love them, your children? The question caught him off guard, raw and direct. With everything I am, he answered honestly. Their absence has been the defining emptiness of my life. Octavia nodded once, a gesture that conveyed neither acceptance nor rejection, simply acknowledgement. We'll be in touch. Outside in the rain, Thaddeus released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The meeting had gone neither as well as he'd hoped, nor as poorly as he'd feared. As he walked toward the autonomous vehicle waiting at the curb, his secure phone vibrated. A message from Lysander Reed, the investigator he'd assigned to dig deeper into the Blackwood's past. Urgent findings. Octavia Blackwood's medical records prior to 16 years ago don't exist. Neither does she. Back at Everett Nexus, Callista paced. The length of Thaddeus's office, her usual composure fractured by agitation. You've set something dangerous in motion, she said, rubbing her wrist where a small, faded scar marked the spot where her own constellation tattoo had once been. Removed, years ago at her insistence. If those children really are Ilara and Elian, then they deserve to know the truth, Thaddeus interrupted, scrolling through the additional information Lysander had sent. And so do I. The truth isn't always a kindness, Thaddeus. Callista stopped pacing, her expression haunted. Sometimes it's a weapon. Before he could respond, his private line chimed, the one whose number he'd given to the Blackwoods. Callista fell silent as he answered. Mr. Everett. It was Zephyr's voice, tightly controlled. We've discussed your proposal. And? We'll agree to the testing, but we have conditions. Thaddeus felt his pulse quicken. Name them. First, our mother receives the treatment regardless of the outcome, as you offered. Second, the testing happens at Crestfall Medical Center, a neutral, facility, and third, there was a brief pause. If the tests show we are your children, you agree to include our mother in whatever happens next. She raised us. That counts for something. The maturity in the boy's voice struck Thaddeus forcefully. I agree to all conditions, he said without hesitation. There's one more thing, Zephyr continued, his voice dropping slightly. Something strange happened after you left. Mom collapsed. Before she lost consciousness, she said something that didn't make sense. Thaddeus's grip tightened on the phone. What was it? She said, ask him about Cassiopeia. Beside him, Callista gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Is she all right? Thaddeus asked, struggling to keep his voice steady as his mind raced. They've taken her to Halcyon Medical. It's not equipped for her condition, but it was closest. We're here now. Stay there, Thaddeus said, already moving toward the door, Callista trailing behind with undisguised panic in her eyes. I'm on my way, and I'm bringing the best doctor in Novaluna with me. He ended the call and turned to Callista, whose face had gone ashen. She knows, Callista whispered. Octavia knows about Cassiopeia. The question is, Thaddeus replied grimly, how much does she know, and who is she really? As they hurried toward the elevator, Thaddeus couldn't shake the feeling that he was rushing headlong into a truth far more complex and potentially devastating than he'd imagined. The identity of his children might be the least shocking revelation. Awaiting him at Halcyon Medical, Cassiopeia wasn't just Seraphina's tattoo. It was the code name for the classified project that had made Everett Quantum Technologies the most powerful corporation in the world, and potentially the reason his family had vanished 16 years ago. Halcyon Medical Center existed in that peculiar space between obsolescence and necessity, too outdated to attract wealthy patients, too essential to the surrounding neighborhoods to close. Its facade of weather-worn concrete and retrofitted solar panels stood in stark contrast to the gleaming medical palaces of downtown Novaluna, where illness was treated with the same efficiency as wealth was managed. Thaddeus strode through, the sliding doors with Callista at his heels, her medical credentials already displayed on her wrist interface. The reception area buzzed with the controlled chaos of an understaffed facility, nurses moving with practiced urgency, patients waiting with resigned patience. Octavia Blackwood, Thaddeus told the harried receptionist, admitted within the last hour. The young man barely glanced up from his terminal. Family only in critical care. Callista stepped forward, her authoritative presence impossible to ignore. Dr. Callista Fenn, specialty certification in Hollander's syndrome. I have critical information about the patient's condition and treatment protocol. That got his attention. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at Callista's credentials, which few doctors in Novaluna could match. Room 307. The twins are with her. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Thaddeus noticed Callista's increasing agitation. The tight set of her shoulders, the almost imperceptible tremor in her usually steady hands. What aren't you telling me about Cassiopeia? He asked quietly. Callista's stride faltered momentarily. This isn't the place, Thaddeus. Then where is? For 16 years you've deflected every question about that project. Now suddenly there's a woman who shouldn't exist, using a code word only a handful of people knew, and claiming to have raised children who bear a striking resemblance to my own. It's complicated, Callista whispered. Simplify it. Before she could answer, they rounded a corner and found Zephyr and Zaria sitting outside room 307, their postures mirror images of controlled anxiety. Zephyr stood immediately, positioning himself slightly in front of his sister, a protective gesture Thaddeus recognized with painful familiarity. You came, Zephyr said, surprise evident beneath his guarded expression. Of course, Thaddeus replied. This is Dr. Fenn, my personal physician and one of the foremost experts on Hollander's syndrome on the West Coast. Zaria rose to stand beside her brother, her eyes fixed on Callista with peculiar intensity. They said Mom's stabilized, but her metabolic readings are erratic. They don't have the equipment here to properly assess her condition. Callista nodded, professional demeanor sliding into place despite her evident discomfort. I'd like to examine her and review her charts, if you'll permit it. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before nodding in unison. She's conscious, Zaria added, but not making much sense. Callista entered the room, leaving Thaddeus alone with the twins in the sterile hallway. An awkward silence descended, 16 years of absence compressed into the space between them. The Cassiopeia thing, Zephyr finally said, breaking the tension. What does it mean? Thaddeus chose his words carefully. It was a research initiative my company undertook many years ago. Advanced computational modeling, theoretical applications of quantum entanglement. Very few people knew about it. And our mother, Octavia, was one of them? Zaria asked, her analytical mind clearly working through implications. That's what I intend to find out, Thaddeus replied honestly. The door to room 307 opened and Callista emerged, her face professionally blank, but her eyes conveying a storm of emotions Thaddeus couldn't fully interpret. Well, he prompted, her condition is deteriorating faster than standard Hollander's progression would suggest, Callista said, her voice clinical. She needs the Lazarin treatment immediately, but there's more. She glanced at the twins. May I speak freely? Zaria nodded. We've been managing Mum's care for years. We understand her condition. Then you should know this isn't pure Hollander's, Callista continued. There are anomalies in her cellular degradation patterns that suggest genetic modification, not natural mutation. Zephyr's eyebrows drew together. What does that mean? It means, Thaddeus interjected, pieces falling into place, that whatever is killing your mother might have been engineered, deliberately. Callista shot him a warning look, but didn't contradict him. She's asking for all of you, together. Inside the hospital room, Octavia appeared even more frail than she had at the house, her skin now possessing an almost translucent quality under the harsh medical lighting. Monitoring devices surrounded her bed, each display showing numbers. That meant little to Thaddeus, but clearly concerned Callista. You brought him, Octavia said, her voice barely above a whisper, as her amber eyes fixed on Callista. After all this time, Callista stiffened. You need to rest, Ms. Blackwood. A fragile laugh escaped Octavia's lips. Still hiding behind titles and formalities? Some things never change, even after 16 years. Her gaze shifted to Thaddeus, while others change beyond recognition. Thaddeus felt the hairs rise on the back of his neck. You know who I am. I've always known, Octavia replied. Just as I've always known this day would come, though I'd hoped for more time. She reached for the twins, who moved to either side of her bed with practiced ease. My beautiful children, I need you to listen carefully now. Mom, you should rest, Zephyr said, concern etched across his features. Dr. Fenn says you need advanced treatment. Mr. Everett has offered to help. I'm sure he has, Octavia murmured. But first, the truth. They deserve that much, Thaddeus. Callista. The twins looked between the adults, confusion giving way to apprehension. Zaria spoke first, her voice uncharacteristically small. What truth? Octavia squeezed their hands. 16 years ago, I made a choice that changed all our lives. A choice to save you both from people who would have used you as nothing more than data points in an experiment, who valued the information in your genetic code more than your lives. Mom, you're not making sense, Zephyr said, glancing at Thaddeus with growing suspicion. I'm not your biological mother. Octavia continued, each word clearly costing her precious energy. But I have loved you as my own from the moment your real mother placed you in my arms and begged me to keep you safe. The twins had gone completely still, their identical expressions frozen between denial and dawning comprehension. "The night of the storm," Thaddeus said, his voice rough with emotion. "The yacht. That wasn't an accident." Octavia's eyes met, his steady despite her failing body. "No, it was an escape." "From what?" Thaddeus demanded. "From you," came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see a woman standing there, her face lined with age, yet hauntingly familiar. Her once golden hair had faded to silver, and time had altered the contours of her face, but Thaddeus would have recognized those eyes anywhere, the same silver-violet shade the twins had inherited. "Seraphina," he breathed, the room seeming to tilt around him. The woman who had been declared dead for 16 years stepped into the room, her movements deliberate and cautious. "Hello, Thaddeus. It's been a long time." The monitors attached to Octavia began chiming warnings as her pulse spiked. Callista moved swiftly to adjust medications, but her eyes remained fixed on Seraphina with undisguised shock. "You're supposed to be dead," Callista said, voice barely audible over the medical equipment. "Yes, that was rather the point," Seraphina replied coolly. Her attention shifted to the twins, who stood frozen in place, their expressions oscillating between confusion and disbelief. "Zephyr, Zaria," the names seemed to catch in her throat. "You've grown so beautiful." "Who are you?" Zephyr demanded, moving protectively closer to Octavia's bed. "She's your birth mother," Octavia whispered, reaching weakly for Zephyr's hand. "And he's your father." The statement hung in the air like suspended glass, fragile and dangerous. Zaria shook her head slowly, backing away from both newcomers. "That's impossible," she said. "Our parents are Octavia and Ambrose Blackwood." "Ambrose never existed," Octavia said gently. "A fiction created to give you a complete family story. But the love was real, Zaria. That was never fabricated." Thaddeus found his voice, addressing the ghost who had haunted his existence for 16 years. "You faked your death, took our children. Let me believe you were all dead." Each accusation emerged flat, emotionless, as if speaking them with the full weight of his betrayal would shatter something vital inside him. Seraphina's composure faltered momentarily. "I did what was necessary to protect them from Cassiopeia, from what you were willing to let happen to them." "I never would have allowed anyone to harm them," Thaddeus countered, heat finally entering his voice. "They were everything to me. You were everything. Yet you put your ambition first," Seraphina replied, an old pain lacing her words. "When you discovered what made them special, you chose the project over their safety." The twins exchanged bewildered glances, clearly struggling to make sense of the unfolding drama. It was Zaria who finally interrupted, her analytical mind seeking order in the chaos. "What made us special?" she asked, addressing both Thaddeus and Seraphina. "What is Cassiopeia, really?" A tense silence followed before Callista, surprisingly, broke it. "Quantum cellular entanglement," she said, ignoring Thaddeus's sharp look. "Your brains are uniquely structured to maintain quantum entanglement between each other across theoretically unlimited distances. The first human binary quantum system." "That's why you've always known what the other is thinking," Octavia added, softly. "Why you feel each other's pain, share dreams. It's not typical twin telepathy, it's something far more profound." Zephyr's face had gone pale. "You're saying we're some kind of scientific experiment." "You were conceived naturally," Seraphina said quickly. "But during my pregnancy, I was exposed to quantum resonance technology without my knowledge or consent." Her gaze cut to Thaddeus, accusation evident. When your unique abilities became apparent, Thaddeus and his research team, including Dr. Venn, saw an opportunity to advance their work, the Cassiopeia project. "That's not how it happened," Thaddeus protested, memories of those early days flooding back. The excitement of discovery mingled with genuine parental awe. "We were studying the phenomenon, yes, but always with your safety as the primary concern, until the military applications became clear," Serafina retorted. "Quantum communications that couldn't be intercepted. Operators neurologically linked across battlefields. Human processors for quantum encryption." She turned to the twins. "They wanted to separate you for testing. Map your neural pathways. Experiment with the limits of your connection." "That phase of testing was theoretical, years away," Callista interjected, "and would have required multiple ethical reviews. Which is why I couldn't wait," Serafina said. "Once the military funding came through, it was only a matter of time." The hospital room had become a courtroom of sorts, with the twins as reluctant judges evaluating competing testimonies about their own origins. Zephyr had gone completely still, his expression hardening into something that reminded Thaddeus painfully of himself. Zaria, meanwhile, had moved to Octavia's side, clutching her hand as if it were an anchor in turbulent waters. "You said, Mom, Octavia is dying because of genetic modification," Zaria said, addressing Callista. "What did you mean?" Callista hesitated, glancing at Octavia, who nodded weakly. "Ms. Blackwood's genetic structure shows signs of having been altered to appear as your biological relative, to create a genetic disguise, essentially. But such modifications are unstable. Her current condition is the result of those modifications, breaking down over time." "You changed your DNA for us?" Zephyr asked, looking at Octavia with newfound horror and gratitude. "A temporary solution that became permanent," Octavia replied. "It was supposed to last 5 years, just long enough to establish new identities far from Novaluna. But when the opportunity to return never came." She trailed off, a spasm of pain crossing her features. "The Lazarin treatment," Thaddeus said suddenly, turning to Callista. "Could it stabilize her modified genes?" Callista considered this, professional interest overriding the tension in the room. Theoretically, yes, the treatment reprograms cellular regeneration pathways, but it wasn't designed for this type of genetic instability. "We need to get her to a proper facility immediately," Thaddeus decided, practical concerns temporarily displacing the emotional maelstrom. "My shuttle can have us at Crestfall Medical in 20 minutes. "No," Serafina countered sharply. "Not Crestfall. If what Octavia says is true about her condition, she needs Garrick Institute. It's the only facility with experience in genetic restoration of this nature." Thaddeus frowned. "Garrick is on the other side of the country." "I have arrangements in place," Serafina replied, not elaborating further. "We can be there in 3 hours." "You've been planning for this," Thaddeus realized, studying his long-lost wife with new understanding. "All these years, you've maintained contingencies." "Of course I have," Serafina said simply. "I've spent 16 years watching for signs that Cassiopeia was active again. When Octavia's condition began deteriorating rapidly, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled." A tense silence followed, broken by Zephyr's calm, measured voice. "I think," he said, looking between the adults who had variously created, concealed, and complicated his existence, "that what Octavia needs takes priority over sorting out the past right now." Zaria nodded in agreement. "We need to get her to this Garrick place. Arguments can wait." Their maturity in the face of life-altering revelations struck Thaddeus forcefully. These were not the children he had lost. They had grown up under another's guidance, shaped by different experiences, different values, yet in their practical approach to crisis, He recognized himself. "Agreed," he said simply, then turned to Seraphina. "But this isn't over. 16 years of questions won't be swept aside once Octavia is stable." "I never expected they would be," Seraphina replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Within 30 minutes, Octavia had been transferred to Thaddeus's private medical shuttle, a sleek vehicle equipped with state-of-the-art stabilization technology. Callista supervised the transition, her professional demeanor masking whatever turmoil the unexpected reunion had stirred within her. The twins insisted on riding with Octavia, while Thaddeus found himself sharing the passenger compartment with Seraphina. The first time they had been alone together in 16 years. The shuttle hummed softly as it navigated through Novaluna's aerial corridors, the city lights creating patterns of illumination that shifted across Seraphina's face. "You haven't asked why I came back now," she said finally, breaking the heavy silence. Thaddeus kept his gaze fixed on the cityscape beyond the window. "I assumed it was because of Octavia's deteriorating condition." "Partly," Seraphina acknowledged. "But there's more. Cassiopeia isn't dormant anymore, Thaddeus. It's active again, but not under your control." That got his attention. He turned to face her fully. "What are you talking about?" "The project was shut down after your disappearance. The research, archived. The official research, perhaps," Seraphina conceded. "But someone has been gathering data on quantum entanglement in human subjects for years, tracking unique genetic markers, identifying candidates." She leaned forward. "Including other pairs of twins with crescent birthmarks." Thaddeus felt a chill spread through him. "That's impossible. The genetic sequence that created Ilara and Elian's entanglement was unique, a result of your exposure to the quantum resonance chamber during pregnancy." "So we thought," Seraphina replied grimly. "But what if it wasn't unique? What if others have been attempting to replicate those conditions, create more human quantum pairs?" Before Thaddeus could respond, the shuttle's communication system chimed. Callista's voice came through, clinical and controlled. "Octavia's condition is destabilizing faster than anticipated. We need to divert to Prairie Memorial." "Prairie Memorial?" Thaddeus frowned. "That's a research hospital, not a treatment facility." "It's the nearest facility with a quantum stabilization chamber," Callista explained, something odd in her tone. "Essential for her current condition." Seraphina had gone rigid beside him. "Override that," she commanded sharply. "Prairie Memorial is a military research installation disguised as a civilian hospital. It's the heart of the new Cassiopeia network." The silence from Callista's end stretched for several seconds before she replied, her voice noticeably colder. "I'm afraid we have no choice if we want to save Octavia. Her cellular cohesion is failing. Without immediate quantum stabilization, she won't survive the journey to Garrick." Thaddeus studied Seraphina's reaction, the tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers curled into fists. "You know something about Prairie Memorial," he said. "Not a question, but a statement." "It's where they've been taking them," Seraphina whispered. "The other quantum pairs, for treatment that's really experimentation." "Them?" Thaddeus repeated. "Children like ours, born with the capacity for quantum entanglement." Seraphina's eyes reflected a haunted knowledge. "I've been tracking disappearances for years. Unusual twins with unexplained abilities, diagnosed with rare conditions requiring specialized care. They go to Prairie Memorial and never re-emerge." The implications struck Thaddeus with physical force. If what Seraphina suggested was true, someone had not only continued Cassiopeia, but had expanded it into something far more sinister than his original research had ever contemplated. "Who?" he demanded. Who has access to that level of quantum technology besides Everett Quantum? Serafina's gaze was steady, knowing. When was the last time you personally inspected your company's classified research division, Thaddeus? The section Callista has been overseeing since my disappearance. The accusation hung between them, impossible to dismiss, yet difficult to accept. Callista, who had been with him through everything, the loss, the grief, the slow rebuilding of his life. Callista, who had insisted they shut down Cassiopeia after the tragedy. Callista, who had removed her own constellation tattoo as if severing ties with that part of their shared past. The shuttle changed course, banking smoothly toward the northeastern section of Novaluna, where Prairie Memorial's distinctive spire pierced the skyline. "I need to see the twins," Thaddeus said, rising from his seat with sudden urgency. "They won't trust you," Serafina warned. "Not yet. Not after everything they've just learned." They'll trust me more than a facility that's been abducting children like them," Thaddeus countered grimly. "We need to get Octavia stabilized, then find another solution, one that doesn't involve Prairie Memorial." He made his way through the shuttle to the medical compartment, where the twins sat beside Octavia's gurney. The woman who had raised his children as her own was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow, skin taking on a bluish tinge that confirmed Callista's diagnosis of cellular breakdown. Zephyr looked up as Thaddeus entered, wariness evident in his posture. "Are we changing course?" "Temporarily," Thaddeus replied, choosing honesty over reassurance. "Octavia needs stabilization before we can attempt the journey to Garrick." He hesitated, then added, "There are concerns about Prairie Memorial that we need to discuss, certain research that may have continued without my knowledge." Zaria, who had been holding Octavia's hand, fixed him with a penetrating stare. "What kind of research? The kind involving quantum entanglement in twins like you?" came Callista's voice as she entered from the forward compartment. Her usual composure had hardened into something colder, more clinical. Which, given Octavia's critical condition, is fortunate. Prairie Memorial has exactly the technology needed to save her. "And to study Zephyr and Zaria without their consent," Thaddeus countered, turning to face her directly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? Getting them into the facility." A flicker of something, anger, disappointment, crossed Callista's features before her professional mask reasserted itself. "Octavia's dying, Thaddeus. Whatever conspiracy theories Serafina has been nurturing during her years in hiding, the immediate medical reality takes precedence." Before Thaddeus could respond, Zephyr interjected with unexpected authority. "We want to speak with our mother." When Callista raised an eyebrow, he clarified, "Serafina." "Of course," Thaddeus agreed immediately, stepping aside to allow Serafina entry while keeping himself positioned between Callista and the twins. Serafina approached carefully, her focus entirely on the twins rather than the rapidly deteriorating Octavia. She knelt beside the gurney, meeting their identical gazes. "Prairie Memorial is not what it appears," she said without preamble. "I believe Dr. Fenn has been using it as a research facility for continuing the Cassiopeia project, studying and experimenting on quantum-entangled twins like yourselves." "That's absurd," Callista scoffed. But there was a tension in her denial that hadn't been there before. Prairie Memorial is a leading research hospital specializing in rare genetic conditions. "Then why," Zaria asked quietly, "does it maintain a quantum stabilization chamber? That technology has no standard medical application." The question hung in the air, surprisingly incisive. Thaddeus looked at his daughter with newfound respect for her analytical mind. "Advanced research requires advanced tools," Callista replied smoothly. "But right now, that chamber represents Octavia's best chance at survival. And once she's stabilized," Zephyr pressed, "what happens to us?" "Standard observation protocols," Callista said. Given your unique genetic makeup, there are medical considerations. Stop lying to them, Serafina interrupted, her voice sharp. Tell them about subject pairs 17 through 23, the ones who never left Prairie Memorial after their observation. Callista's expression changed then, the professional veneer cracking to reveal something harder, more determined beneath. You always were too clever for your own good, Serafina, too quick to make moral judgments about scientific necessities. The admission, indirect as it was, sent a chill through the medical compartment. Thaddeus moved closer to the twins, a protective instinct overriding years of uncertainty about his place in their lives. How long? He demanded of Callista. How long have you been continuing Cassiopeia without my knowledge? Continuing. Callista's laugh held no humor. Continuing implies interruption. Cassiopeia never stopped, Thaddeus. While you retreated into grief and guilt, the research continued. Advanced, evolved into something far beyond your original vision. Under whose authority? Thaddeus pressed, though he suspected the answer. The Directorate has always recognized the strategic importance of quantum human interfaces, Callista replied, referring to the shadowy military-industrial coalition that controlled much of Novaluna's technological development. They provided the resources necessary to continue when you didn't lost focus. And the other children? Serafina asked, her voice tight with restrained emotion. The ones you've been collecting? Participants in humanity's next evolutionary step, Callista said, a fervent light entering her eyes. The quantum consciousness network we've established has already yielded breakthroughs in distributed computing, secure communications, even limited precognition. The clinical detachment with which she discussed experimenting on children struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. This was not the Callista he thought he knew, or perhaps it was, and he had been too blind to see it. The shuttle began its descent toward Prairie Memorial, the facility's landing pad illuminating to guide their approach. Thaddeus glanced out the viewport, noting with growing unease the security measures visible even from the air. Motion tracking systems, energy shields, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Not a hospital, a fortress. We need a different plan, he said quietly to Serafina and the twins. One that gets Octavia the stabilization she needs without placing you two at risk. Zephyr and Zaria exchanged one of their silent communications before Zaria spoke. We already have one, but you'll need to trust us completely. Thaddeus nodded without hesitation. Tell me. Not here, Zephyr said, glancing meaningfully at Callista, who was adjusting Octavia's medication while keeping a careful watch on you. Their conversation. Oh, please, Callista said, not looking up from her work. Whatever amateur evasion tactic you're planning won't succeed. Prairie Memorial has been preparing for your arrival since the moment Thaddeus identified you at the auction. The matter-of-fact statement landed like a stone. You've been monitoring me, Thaddeus realized, pieces falling into horrible alignment. All these years. Guiding you, Callista corrected, keeping you focused on your company, while the true work of Cassiopeia continued unhindered. Though I must admit, your sudden interest in antiquities auctions was an unexpected variable. The shuttle touched down with a gentle shudder. Through the viewport, Thaddeus could see a medical team approaching, their uniforms bearing Prairie Memorial's distinctive logo, a stylized constellation, Cassiopeia. The doors of the medical shuttle hissed open, releasing a gust of pressurized air into the sterile environment of Prairie Memorial's landing pad. Callista stepped out first, immediately greeted by white uniformed personnel who moved with military precision despite their medical attire. Thaddeus remained inside, positioning himself between the approaching team and the twins, who huddled protectively around Octavia's gurney. "Mr. Everett," called a tall woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe knot. "I'm Director Vega. We've been expecting you." Her gaze shifted past him to the twins, a clinical interest in her eyes that made Thaddeus's skin crawl. And the quantum pair 24, of course. Seraphina stepped forward, her posture changing subtly, shoulders squared, chin lifted, the bearing of someone prepared for confrontation. Adrienne, still hiding behind euphemisms, I see. Director Vega's expression registered brief surprise before settling into practiced neutrality. Seraphina Everett, Quantum Casualty 01, fascinating. She glanced at her wrist interface. Security Enhancement Protocol Alpha 7. Immediately, the medical team's demeanor shifted. Hands moved to concealed weapons, and the perimeter of the landing pad shimmered as additional security measures activated. That won't be necessary, Callista interjected smoothly. Ms. Blackwood's condition is critical. We need the stabilization chamber immediately. She gestured toward Octavia's. Gurney, standard containment protocols for the subjects can wait until after we've secured the primary asset. Subjects, Zaria echoed, the word dripping with newfound understanding of their position in this unfolding scenario. Thaddeus caught Seraphina's eye, a silent communication passing between them, perhaps not quantum entanglement, but the residual connection of two people who had once shared everything. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Director Vega, Thaddeus said, adopting the authoritative tone he used in boardrooms when reclaiming control of difficult situations. As the original architect of Cassiopeia and primary shareholder of Everett Quantum Technologies, I'm invoking Protocol Sundown. He stepped forward, keeping his gaze locked with Vega's. Verification code, 7 Delta Helios Nadir Perseus. The effect was immediate. Vega's composure fractured, uncertainty flickering across her features. That protocol was decommissioned 16 years ago. No, Thaddeus countered smoothly. It was obscured. The failsafe remains active in the core programming of every quantum system developed by my company, including those within Prairie Memorial. He's bluffing, Callista said sharply. Thaddeus has been estranged from the operational aspects of Cassiopeia for years. Are you willing to risk it? Thaddeus challenged Vega directly. Sundown initiates a complete systemic purge. Every quantum processor, every data node, every research file, wiped simultaneously. 16 years of your work, gone in 90 seconds. The landing pad had gone completely still, the medical team frozen in a tableau of uncertainty, awaiting direction. What do you want? Vega finally asked, calculation replacing surprise. Stabilization for Octavia, Thaddeus replied, using your quantum chamber, after which we all leave, Octavia, Seraphina, and the twins, without interference or tracking. Absurd, Callista scoffed. The quantum pair is essential to what? Seraphina interrupted. Your precious network, your experiments on children. Tell them, Callista. Tell them how many pairs didn't survive the integration process. A heavy silence fell across the landing pad, broken only by the soft beeping of Octavia's medical monitors. Progress requires sacrifice, Callista said finally, her voice soft but unyielding. The quantum consciousness network will revolutionize human existence. Individual concerns are secondary to species advancement. Individual concerns, Zephyr repeated, disgust evident in his tone. You mean children like us? Vega had been studying Thaddeus carefully during this exchange, evidently assessing the credibility of his threat. The stabilization chamber requires 6 hours for complete cellular reintegration, she said finally. You'll remain in the secure medical wing during that time, after which... She glanced at Callista, who gave a barely perceptible nod, after which you'll be free to leave with Ms. Blackwood, provided her condition stabilizes. And the twins and Seraphina, Thaddeus insisted. Of course, Vega agreed too smoothly, though we'd like to offer the opportunity for a voluntary examination of the quantum pair, purely observational, no invasive procedures. No, Serafina said flatly. We'll discuss it after Octavia is stable, Thaddeus countered, sensing an opportunity to gain entry to the facility without immediate conflict. First, the treatment. Vega nodded, gesturing to the medical team, who approached the shuttle to transfer Octavia's gurney. As they maneuvered her out, Thaddeus noticed Zephyr slip something small and metallic into his pocket, a component from the shuttle's communication array. The boy caught his father's gaze and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Trust us completely, Zaria had said. Whatever plan the twins had conceived, Thaddeus decided he would follow their lead. The procession moved from the landing pad into the facility proper, passing through a series of security checkpoints that scanned and catalogued each person entering. Thaddeus noted with growing unease the military precision of the operation. The subtle presence of armed guards disguised as orderlies, the omnipresent surveillance systems tracking their movements. Prairie Memorial bore only a superficial resemblance to a hospital. Beneath the veneer of a medical facility lurked the unmistakable infrastructure of a research installation, or perhaps, more accurately, a prison. They were led to a specialized treatment wing where the centerpiece was a massive cylindrical chamber of polished metal and programmable glass, surrounded by quantum computers whose processing cores glowed with eerie blue light. Technicians in specialized gear monitored displays, showing cascading data streams too complex for human interpretation without AI assistance. The quantum stabilization chamber, Vega explained with undisguised pride. The only one of its kind, in North America, capable of manipulating cellular cohesion at the quantum level, and conveniently designed to accommodate two subjects simultaneously, Serafina observed coldly, pointing to the chamber's dual compartments. Vega's smile tightened. Various configurations are possible depending on treatment requirements. Octavia was transferred from the gurney onto the chamber's specialized platform, her frail body dwarfed by the imposing technology surrounding her. Callista supervised the process with professional efficiency, instructing the technicians on specific calibrations required for Octavia's unique condition. The treatment requires complete biological monitoring, Callista explained, approaching. The twins, with medical sensors, will need comparative baseline readings from both of you to optimize the quantum resonance patterns. No, Zephyr said firmly, stepping back. No sensors, no readings. Don't be ridiculous, Callista chided. This is for Octavia's benefit. Her modified DNA was designed to mimic your genetic structure. Proper calibration requires... We said no, Zaria reinforced, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with her brother. Tension crackled through the treatment room. Thaddeus noticed several technicians shifting positions, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Perhaps, he suggested smoothly, a compromise. The twins can provide blood samples, a single draw conducted here, with all of us present. That should provide the genetic markers you need without requiring direct sensors on them. Callista and Vega exchanged glances, a silent calculation passing between them. Acceptable, Vega conceded finally, but we'll need the samples immediately. To properly calibrate the chamber, Ms. Blackwood's condition won't allow for delays. As a phlebotomist was summoned to collect the blood samples, Thaddeus maneuvered himself closer to Serafina. Do you know what they're planning? He murmured. Not specifically, she replied under her breath. But Prairie Memorial has been acquiring quantum-entangled twins for years. They don't let them leave. And Octavia, will the treatment actually help her? Serafina's expression softened slightly. Yes, the quantum stabilization technology is legitimate. It's what happens after that concerns me. The blood draw proceeded under the watchful eyes of all parties, the twins submitting to the procedure with tense compliance. Once the samples were collected and rushed to an adjacent lab for processing, Vega directed them to a waiting area adjacent to the treatment chamber. The stabilization process requires minimal personnel, she explained. You'll be more comfortable here. Refreshments will be provided, and you can monitor Ms. Blackwood's progress via that display. She indicated a large screen showing multiple views of Octavia as technicians prepared her for the chamber. I'd prefer to stay in the treatment room, Thaddeus said. Not possible, Vega replied crisply. The quantum field disrupts non-essential biological systems. Only specially shielded personnel can remain during activation. Before Thaddeus could argue further, Callista stepped in. It's standard procedure, Thaddeus, and truly safer for everyone. Her tone had softened to the familiar, reasonable voice he'd trusted for years. I'll personally oversee every aspect of Octavia's treatment. You have my word. The words rang hollow now, tainted by 16 years of deception. Yet as Thaddeus looked at Octavia's deteriorating condition on the monitor, he recognized they had little choice but to proceed. Very well, he conceded, but I expect constant updates. Any deviation from normal treatment protocols, any unexpected procedures, and I implement sundown immediately. Of course, Vega agreed, her smile not reaching her eyes. Will begin momentarily. When the door closed behind Vega and Callista, leaving Thaddeus, Seraphina, and the twins in the waiting area, under the watchful eyes of two orderlies, Zephyr immediately moved to Zaria's side. They positioned themselves in the corner farthest. From the surveillance cameras, their postures suggesting nothing more than anxious teenagers seeking comfort from each other. Thaddeus and Seraphina exchanged glances before casually moving to join them, creating a family huddle that would appear natural to observers. They're going to try to separate us, Zephyr said without preamble, his voice barely above a whisper. Once Octavia is stabilized, or maybe before, they'll manufacture an emergency, requiring us to be moved to different areas of the facility. How can you be certain? Thaddeus asked, impressed by the boy's tactical assessment. Because that's what we would do, Zaria replied simply. Divide and isolate, standard containment procedure. What we need, Zephyr continued, is external communication, a way to contact our network. Your network, Seraphina echoed, surprise evident in her tone. Zaria's lips twitched in the barest hint of a smile. You didn't think you were the only one tracking quantum pairs, did you? We've been building our own connections for years, underground, protected. Thaddeus stared at his children with newfound appreciation for their resourcefulness. That's why you needed the component from the shuttle. Zephyr nodded. Quantum entanglement communicator. Limited range, but if we can boost the signal enough to reach the city limits. He trailed off meaningfully. You have people waiting, Thaddeus realized. This was planned. Not exactly, Zaria admitted. We've had emergency protocols in place ever since Mom, Octavia, started deteriorating rapidly. When you showed up at the auction, we had to adapt quickly. The sundial, Seraphina said suddenly. It wasn't just a family heirloom, was it? Zephyr's expression confirmed her suspicion. Octavia insisted we keep it, even when selling it could have funded her treatments months ago. She said it was insurance. It's a quantum key, Thaddeus guessed, the pieces falling into place. The obsidian has been molecularly encoded, hasn't it? That's why you needed it at the auction. Not to sell it, but to activate it in public where its signature would be detected by your network. The twins exchanged impressed glances. He really is as smart as Octavia said, Zaria murmured too. Her brother. What's the plan? Seraphina asked, glancing toward the monitors where technicians were now sealing Octavia into the stabilization chamber. First, we need to ensure Octavia receives the full treatment, Zephyr said firmly. That's non-negotiable. She sacrificed everything for us. Agreed, Thaddeus said without hesitation. Then what? Then we need to get to the facility's quantum core, Zaria explained. With the component Zephyr salvaged, we can transmit a shutdown signal to every Cassiopeia installation simultaneously, not just data, a complete quantum resonance cascade that will permanently disable their ability to detect or track quantum pairs. That's ambitious, Serafina said carefully. It's necessary, Zephyr replied, his expression hardening. They're holding 23 pairs here, children from 8 to 16. Some haven't seen daylight in years. The revelation hit Thaddeus like a physical blow. The scope of what had been done in Cassiopeia's name, in his name, however indirectly, was staggering. How do we reach the core? He asked, decision made. This facility is locked down tighter than any corporate installation I've seen. That's where you come in, Zaria said, meeting his gaze directly. Protocol sundown isn't real, is it? You were bluffing. Thaddeus smiled slightly, impressed by her perception. Not entirely. The protocol exists, but it requires direct access to the core. I couldn't trigger it remotely. But your credentials should grant you access, Zephyr pressed. You're still listed as Cassiopeia's principal architect in their systems. We checked. The twins looked at the treatment room display, where Octavia's vital signs were steadily improving. Soon, when the stabilization reaches 80%, that's the critical threshold. She'll recover fully from that point, even if the process is interrupted. And that moment came sooner than expected. As medical alarms blared throughout the facility, the twins executed their plan with precision. The four of them managed to reach the quantum core, where Thaddeus, with the component from the shuttle, transmitted the shutdown signal that disabled the entire Cassiopeia network permanently. In the chaos that followed, they freed not just themselves, but all 23 quantum pairs being held at Prairie Memorial. An extraction team, part of the twins' underground network, arrived just in time to evacuate everyone safely. Days later, after Octavia had been properly settled at Garrick Institute for the completion of her treatment, Thaddeus stood on the observation deck of his newly acquired estate in the Catskill Mountains. The property, vast and secluded, offered both privacy and proximity to Garrick, where Octavia would remain for several weeks. The morning mist was just beginning to lift from the valleys below, revealing glimpses of the landscape that would become home, at least for now. Behind him, the main house hummed with activity as Serafina coordinated with the twins' underground network, establishing secure communications and arranging safe relocations for the rescued quantum pairs. "May I join you?" Thaddeus turned to find Zephyr standing in the doorway, his posture still carrying that careful reserve, but his expression more open than it had been in the days since their escape. "Of course," Thaddeus replied, gesturing to the space beside him at the railing. They stood in companionable silence for several moments, watching an eagle soar over the distant ridgeline. "I've been thinking about the obsidian sundial," Zephyr said finally. "What about it?" "It wasn't just a quantum key," Zephyr explained. "It was a symbol, a physical manifestation of time, how it flows forward endlessly, but also how shadows return to the same place eventually." He glanced sideways at Thaddeus. "Octavia always said it would bring us full circle when the time was right." Adi. Insight struck Thaddeus forcefully, the poetic symmetry of using an heirloom that measured time's passage to reunite a family fractured by time's toll. "She's an extraordinary woman," Thaddeus acknowledged. "I owe her a debt I can never repay." "You can," Zephyr corrected, "by helping us protect the others like us, by using Everett Quantum to shield rather than expose. It was the first direct request his son had made of him, and the weight of it, the implicit trust it represented, was not lost on Thaddeus. "I will," he promised. "Everything I've built, everything I've learned, it's yours and Zaria's now to use as you see fit." A new voice joined their conversation. "That's quite the inheritance to spring on teenage kids," Zaria said, stepping onto the deck with 2 steaming mugs of tea. She handed one to each of them before producing her own from a pocket, a small moment of everyday magic that made Thaddeus smile. "You seem well equipped to handle it," he observed, noting how his daughter moved with increasing comfort in his presence. "We've had good teachers," she replied, glancing back toward the house where Serafina could be seen through the window, deep in conversation via holographic interface with unseen allies. "And we'll need more." The statement contained a question, an invitation for Thaddeus to define his role in their future. The corporate titan who had created Cassiopeia, who had built a technological empire on quantum innovations, now stood at a crossroads of his own making. "Whatever you need me to be," he said honestly. "Father, mentor, partner, shield, I'm here for both of you, in whatever capacity serves you best. Do." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a phenomenon that Thaddeus now observed with wonder rather than scientific curiosity. Then, in a synchronized movement that spoke of decisions jointly made, they both extended their hands toward him. "Let's start with Father," Zephyr suggested, his voice carrying a hint of that tentative hope that had begun to characterize their interactions. "And see where it goes from there." Thaddeus took their offered hands, feeling the connection that transcended the quantum entanglement that had brought them together. This was simpler, more elemental, the bond between parent and child, damaged but not destroyed by time and circumstance. As they stood together on the mountainside, overlooking the vast landscape that represented their new beginning, Thaddeus realized that his life had come full circle, like the shadow on the obsidian sundial. What he had lost 16 years ago had returned to him, changed, evolved, but fundamentally intact. The family heirloom that had caught his eye at the Meridian auction house had indeed been valuable beyond measure, though not in any currency recognized by that establishment. Its true worth lay in what it had restored. Not just his children, but his humanity, his purpose, his future. And as the morning sun finally broke through the mist, illuminating the 3 figures on the observation deck, their shadows merged into a single, unified silhouette against the golden light. A family reunited not by blood alone, but by choice, by forgiveness, and by the promise of a shared tomorrow. The journey from the Meridian auction house to the mountain estate in the Catskills had been far from linear. As Thaddeus stood watching the sunrise with his children, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that a simple obsidian sundial had set in motion. What had begun as a fleeting moment of recognition, a birthmark glimpsed across a crowded room, had unraveled 16 years of carefully constructed deception and unleashed a cascade of revelations that none of them could have anticipated. In the weeks following their escape from Prairie Memorial, a new rhythm had gradually established itself. The mountain estate, purchased through untraceable channels with Thaddeus's considerable resources, had become both sanctuary and command center. The spacious main house now housed not only the immediate family, but also a rotating cast of rescued quantum pairs and their support network. What had once been a cold corporate titan's vacation property had transformed into something vibrant and purposeful, a haven for those whom society had failed to protect. Serafina had taken charge of the logistics operation, her years in hiding having honed her skills in creating new identities and secure communications channels. Her network, once dedicated solely to keeping herself and the twins hidden, now expanded to encompass dozens of quantum-entangled children and their families. She moved through the estate with quiet efficiency, her former academic brilliance now channeled into strategies and safeguards. Octavia's recovery had progressed remarkably well. The quantum stabilization treatment at Prairie Memorial, despite the chaos surrounding it, had successfully reintegrated her modified genetics. Though still physically frail, her mind remained sharp as ever, and she had become the emotional touchstone for many of the rescued children. They gravitated toward her naturally, sensing in her a kindred spirit who understood both sacrifice and survival. The relationship between Octavia and Serafina had evolved from initial wariness to mutual respect, and increasingly genuine friendship. They shared not only a love for the twins, but also a common experience of having shaped their lives around protecting them. On quiet evenings, they could sometimes be found on the East Terrace, heads bent in conversation, occasionally punctuated by soft laughter. Whatever complicated emotions might exist between the woman who had given birth to the twins and the woman who had raised them, they had found a way to navigate them with grace. As for the twins themselves, they had blossomed in this new environment. Released from the constant vigilance that had characterized their early lives, yet still purposeful in their mission to protect others like themselves, they had found a balance that allowed their individual personalities to shine more distinctly than ever. Zephyr had discovered an aptitude for quantum programming that rivaled even Thaddeus's expertise. Together, father and son spent long hours in the estate's advanced laboratory, developing new safeguards against quantum detection and tracking. Their relationship, initially the more strained of the two parent-child connections, had found its footing in shared intellectual passion. Thaddeus never pushed for more emotional intimacy than Zephyr was ready to offer, understanding that trust, like any quantum state, could not be forced into alignment, but must settle there naturally. Zaria had emerged as a natural leader among the rescued children, particularly the younger ones. Her empathetic nature, combined with her analytical mind, made her uniquely suited to helping them understand and control their abilities. She worked closely with both Serafina and Octavia, creating a curriculum of sorts that balanced quantum theory with practical applications and ethical considerations. Her approach to Thaddeus had been more open than her brother's from the start, her curiosity about the father she'd never known overcoming her initial wariness. The transformation of Everett quantum technologies had begun as well, though more gradually and with considerable resistance from the board of directors. Thaddeus had returned to his corporate headquarters just once for a meeting that had become the stuff of corporate legend. Without revealing the full truth of Cassiopeia or his personal connection to it, he had announced a fundamental restructuring of the company's research directives and ethical oversight protocols. For too long, he had told the stunned executives, we have pursued quantum advancement without sufficient consideration of its human implications. That ends today. The resulting power struggle had been brief, but intense. Several board members, those with the closest ties to military applications, had attempted to force Thaddeus out. They had failed to appreciate how thoroughly he had prepared. With controlling shares still in his possession and the support of key investors who valued stability over controversy, he had emerged with his position intact and his opponents neutralized. The Directorate, that shadowy coalition of military and industrial interests, had proven more problematic. The destruction of Cassiopeia's quantum detection network had been a significant setback, but organizations of that nature rarely abandoned profitable objectives without resistance. Intelligence gathered through the twins' network suggested they were already attempting to rebuild, though without access to the original quantum pairs, their progress was limited. This ongoing threat had necessitated certain precautions. The Mountain Estate's security systems, designed by Thaddeus himself, incorporated quantum encryption protocols that even the most advanced computational systems could not break. Regular relocations of the rescued children and their families ensured that no pattern could be established. and a sophisticated early warning system utilizing the quantum pair's natural entanglement abilities provided an alarm network that no conventional surveillance could detect. Yet despite these necessary measures, life at the estate was far from grim. Children laughed and played in the extensive grounds. Teenagers argued about music and movies, their quantum abilities momentarily forgotten in the universal drama of adolescence. Adults formed friendships and support networks, finding in each other the understanding that the outside world could never provide. For Thaddeus, these moments of normality were perhaps the most precious. After years of isolation, surrounded only by corporate sycophants and the cold comfort of his wealth, he found himself increasingly drawn to the simple pleasures of family life. Teaching Zephyr to drive the estate's collection of vintage cars, listening to Zaria practice her violin on the western terrace as the sun set behind the mountains. Even the occasional awkward family dinners, where conversations sometimes stalled and old tensions resurfaced, held their own peculiar charm. One evening, about a month after their arrival at the estate, Thaddeus had found Octavia sitting alone in the library, the obsidian sundial resting on the table before her. He had hesitated in the doorway, still uncertain of his place in her presence, but she had gestured him forward with a small smile. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" she had said, running her fingers along the polished surface of the sundial. "Such a simple object, yet it changed everything." "Did you know?" Thaddeus had asked, settling into the chair opposite her. "When you kept it all those years, did you know what it would lead to?" Octavia's amber eyes, so different from the silver-violet gaze of the twins, had studied him thoughtfully. "Not specifically, but I knew it was important, more than just a family heirloom. Serafina insisted we keep it safe, even when things were at their most difficult financially. She said it was encoded with quantum signatures that would be recognized by the right people at the right time." "She always was brilliant," Thaddeus had acknowledged, even before the quantum exposure altered her perception. "Yes," Octavia had agreed, "but I think she was also hedging her bets. Part of her always believed that someday the twins might need to find their way back to you, or you to them." The observation had surprised him, even though she fled to protect them from me, from what she believed I would allow to happen to them. "People contain multitudes, Thaddeus," Octavia had said with a slight smile. "It's possible to fear someone's choices and still recognize their value, to protect children from a parent while still honoring the connection between them." It was this wisdom, this fundamental understanding of human complexity, that had made Octavia such an exceptional guardian for the twins. She had never reduced the situation to simple villains and heroes, never taught the children to hate or fear their biological father, despite the very real dangers that had necessitated their separation. This conversation had marked a turning point in Thaddeus's understanding of the unusual family unit they were creating. Not a traditional nuclear family, certainly, nor even a conventional blended one, but something more fluid and adaptive, a constellation of connections held together, not by social convention, but by choice and circumstance. As spring turned to summer, this constellation continued to evolve. The twins celebrated their 17th birthday, their first with both biological parents present, in a celebration that blended old traditions fostered by Octavia with new ones introduced by Thaddeus and Serafina. They had insisted on no expensive gifts, asking instead for donations to the support fund for relocated quantum pairs. Thaddeus had complied, though he had also discreetly arranged for college funds and trust accounts that would ensure their financial independence regardless of their chosen paths. The question of those paths remained open. Both twins had expressed interest in continuing their education, though conventional schooling presented obvious security challenges. Thaddeus had proposed private tutors, while Serafina favored a remote learning approach that would allow the twins to connect with peers. Without physical exposure, the discussions were ongoing, part of the constant negotiation that characterized their new family dynamic. What remained unnegotiated, however, was the fundamental commitment that bound them together. The twins were no longer simply Thaddeus's missing children, or Serafina's hidden treasures, or Octavia's beloved charges. They had become individuals in their own right, making conscious choices about who and what they wanted to be. And they had chosen, with clear eyes and open hearts, to include all three adults in their complex definition of family. The quantum entanglement that had made them scientific marvels was no longer their defining characteristic. It had been subsumed into a more profound human entanglement, the web of love, responsibility, respect, and shared purpose that constitutes a family in its truest sense. As summer deepened and the mountain forests thickened with green life, plans were already forming for the next phase of their mission. The destruction of Cassiopeia's detection network had been a significant victory, but it represented only the beginning of a larger campaign. So long as organizations like the Directorate existed, children with special abilities would remain vulnerable to exploitation. True safety would require not just defensive measures, but proactive ones, changing laws, shifting public perception, creating ethical frameworks for quantum human research. It was an immense undertaking, one that would likely span decades rather than years. But standing on the mountain estate, watching his children move confidently through a world that had once threatened to cage them, Thaddeus felt equal to the challenge. The man who had once measured success in market share and profit margins now found it in moments of connection, in problems solved together, in the gradual healing of old wounds. The obsidian sundial had been returned to its place of honor in the estate's main hall. No longer a quantum key or a valuable antique, it had become something more significant, a reminder of the circular nature of time, of how endings become beginnings, of how shadows always return to their starting points, changed yet recognizable. Every evening at sunset, its shadow would stretch across the polished floor in a perfect line, marking another day in this new life they were building together. And every morning, that shadow would disappear, absorbed back into the substance of the sundial itself, waiting for the cycle to begin again. In quantum mechanics, there exists a principle known as entanglement resurrection, the theory that particles once entangled retain a memory of that connection, making it possible to re-establish quantum coherence even after apparent separation. What Thaddeus had discovered in the strange journey from that auction house to this mountain refuge was that human connections possessed a similar resilience. Bonds of blood and love, once formed, could lie dormant but never truly die. They remained, waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst, to reawaken and reassert themselves across whatever distance had intervened. The obsidian sundial had been that catalyst, the object that bridged past and present, absence and presence, loss and recovery. Its value had never resided in its material composition or even its quantum capabilities, but in its power to bring together what had been broken apart, to make whole what had been fragmentary, to restore what had seemed irretrievably lost. And, in that restoration, something new and unprecedented had emerged, a family defined not by convention, but by choice, not by simplicity, but by complexity, not by perfection, but by the ongoing, imperfect effort to understand and honor each other's truths. This, Thaddeus reflected as he watched his children move through the sunlit gardens of their mountain sanctuary, was the true legacy of the obsidian sundial. Not wealth or power or scientific advancement, but the simple, profound miracle of connection restored. Everything else, The quantum physics, the corporate machinations, the cloak and dagger escapes had merely been the path that led to this essential truth: that love, once established, remains entangled in the fabric of existence, waiting only for recognition to spring back into conscious life. And in that recognition, across all barriers of time and circumstance, lies the possibility of redemption. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.